PHNX's coverage from Radio Row continues in Field Yates, of course. Fantasy Focus, ESPN. I've got my alerts set on Twitter or X for Field because that's how big you are.
Well, first of all, I would refuse to call that thing X. I'm sticking with Twitter.
I'm sticking with Twitter too. I don't know why that came out of my mouth.
It just seems so much more natural to call it Twitter. Like, the iPhone has not yet changed. When you start to type TWE,
right,
it keeps it as tweet. So I'm thinking that Twitter will remain forever. There are certain things that I just can't kick.
Right.
Arrowhead Stadium will always be Arrowhead Stadium to me, amongst other things. So that's my Twitter rant right there.
Well, what's going to remain this offseason, the Arizona Cardinals are loaded, and it looks like they're poised for a big offseason. I think it's going to be fun to be Monty Austin for with the cap space, but then what you and Mel Kiper have been breaking down, which I've been, it's just, you know, the content, I can't get enough of it as far as the mocks and then what you guys are doing before you release them. But 4 and 27, what are you thinking as far as that? I mean, it seems pretty simple as far as if it goes 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks, what the Cardinals' move is.
I hate to say that anything could be simple in the NFL draft because you and I both know how crazy and complicated things can get with just one pick that goes awry. However, we're having this conversation on February 6th. So on February 6th, my sort of forecast and estimate is that picks 1, 2, 3 for quarterback-needy teams will be quarterbacks. That all of a sudden presses us to the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 4. And, you know, I always tread lightly when coaches publicly declare, like, this is our guy. You know, obviously Kyler got a lot of support from Jonathan Gannon. And I don't know if I heard as much, obviously Monty's not addressing the media as much as Gannon is, but Gannon made it very clear, like, he's our guy, right? There's been a lot of public Kyler support. And I think because of how the draft shook out and them having the 4th pick, like, it's hard to make a case against that because I don't think there would be a 4th quarterback that if the first 3 picks are quarterback is worth taking. So they make it really easy, right? Like Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously a tremendous prospect, fills a major need. We'll see what happens with Hollywood Brown, scheduled to be a free agent in a month and a half from right now. But beyond that, youth, you have some, Michael Wilson from a year ago and Rondell Moore from a couple seasons ago. But what they don't have is a guy who has the upside and the size Marvin Harrison Jr. brings. We're talking about one of the best wide receiver prospects perhaps in the past 15 or so years. Right. That sounds hyperbolic, and obviously there's been a lot of great young receivers over the past few years, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua this past season. But it does feel like coming into the process, coming into the league, our feeling in terms of how Marvin Harrison Jr. stacks up is close to the very top of the heap.
Now, what did you see from Kyler at the end of this season? It seemed like he finally had the infrastructure offensively, and the emergence of Trey McBride was unbelievable. You coupled Trey McBride with maybe a Marvin Harrison Jr. The offensive line was playing a lot better. Fantasy Focus, I know, as you said, we're sitting here in February. Where are you going to start to rank Kyler Murray next season? Is he top 5 fantasy quarterback?
He could probably creep into that like top 8 conversation. With Kyler, what we saw this past year, which was surprising to me, was at least the first 2 games he was back, he had a rushing touchdown. I think it was 3 of his first 4. He ended up with a rushing touchdown. And you're thinking to yourself, a guy coming off of an ACL tear, probably less likely to be mobile than a guy who was fully healthy, which Kyler will be going into this upcoming season. But Kyler at his very best has been one of the best players, obviously, in the NFL and certainly in the fantasy football world. So I think there's a chance that Kyler will compete for that. Like I sort of look at the top as, I don't know about like impenetrable, but between Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, who's been the highest scoring quarterback in fantasy for 3 straight years. Like, it's going to be hard to dethrone him unless he decides to retire this offseason, which he won't. And then, the Lamar Jacksons, Patrick Mahomes, like, it's kind of that next tier. We'll see also with, like, Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, some of these guys who have comparable athletic ability to Kyler, and how healthy they are coming into the year. So I think there's a real chance that Kyler is in that, like, 5 to 8 conversation.
Last question, 27th overall. What's your philosophy on that? You've got the, do you go premium position? Like Mel had them going Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, and after the Senior Bowl, I feel like that guy's not even going to be there at 27. What do you think?
I'd be surprised if Guyton lasts that long, but things can change so much. So it's an interesting one, right? So when you lose your starting left tackle in, week 16, 17 with an ACL tear? It was DJ Humphries who I think it was 16, 17. It was late, right?
Right.
It was one of the final
and he's got an MCL injury, so it seems like he's probably going to be out for the most of the next season if they don't make him a cap casualty.
I was going to say, and beyond that, like his contract right now suggests that he's the kind of player that, like, is at least one to monitor over the next month and a half here. But you drafted Paris Johnson last year, who has the chance to be, I think, a very, very good left tackle in the NFL. Or you can just kind of plant him where he's been, and he can just be a high-level right tackle, which we've seen that position rise in prominence over the past few years. Guys like Penei Sewell are kind going to probably end up with a record-breaking deal in due time. Offensive tackle, it aligns nicely in terms of how much depth there is. There are a lot of options here in this year's draft class. Could be as many as 6, 7, 8 first-round offensive tackles. And for Arizona, because I think that they're in this really unique spot right now. First of all, flush with draft capital. 2 first-round picks alone give you some optionality. Beyond that is, well, everybody wants to win. I'm not saying that a team wants to lose next year. It doesn't feel like next year is the make-or-break year for this regime or this franchise. So you can kind of, where there are other franchises, and I'm not making this just about them, but the Jets at pick 10, like, they need a guy who's going to come in and start from day one. You just can't afford it, right? They want to win the Super Bowl next year. Arizona probably comfortable with a player who, even if he needs a year to develop.
Maybe a little red shirt action.
Right, even if it's not a red shirt, even if it's like this guy's going to become a fully formed player in 2025, 2026, et cetera, like, you kind of have the ability to tab that type of player in the first round because it steps forward next year. Going to be measured obviously by wins and losses, but also just like, is the overall talent level better? The defense played its tail off for much of last year. I think the offense is going to catch up this year as well. Continuity, by the way.
Absolutely.
Wait, Drew Petzing might be like the third longest tenured offensive coordinator in the league right now. By the way, fun fact: Drew and I played in the same conference growing up.
No
there
way.
aren't too many NESCAC football alums in the NFL, so he probably doesn't know who I am.
You got a couple inches on Drew too.
A couple, yeah. But Drew, I think Drew's got a couple, probably, couple of tax brackets on me,
and he's keeping it going. I see him at the facility, always he's in the lab working out. Can I ask you this? We always like to say, my co-host Johnny Venerable, he's a big Trey McBride guy, and I know you guys are fantasy focused. You got on that train early. Can you confidently say you're a McBridesmaid?
First of all, first time I've heard that term. Yes, I am a McBridesmaid. Great movie, great player. What's the ceiling for him next year? And Travis Kelce maybe put some of this to bed.
80 catches, 800 yards.
It's ridiculous.
Didn't see a ton of touchdowns, but
in a Cardinals season, right?
I mean, that position was as futile as it gets for so long, but it was finally great to see somebody break out.
He'll make some real steps forward this offseason. And Travis Kelce, again, may have put this to bed because of how he surged during the playoffs. We'll see on Sunday with the Super Bowl. But it felt like the opportunity for a new tight end one to step in was maybe in place. Sam Laporta, the highest scoring tight end in all of fantasy this past year, but between Sam Laporta, George Kittle, of course Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride,
Hawkinson when he comes back,
who's, if he comes back healthy from that ACL, MCL, like that's 6. Evan Ingram set the single season record for catches by a tight end in NFL history. Wow. So there's obviously 7, 8, 9, 10 guys this year that have a real case to be a premium draft pick for you, which is that feels like speaking a different language when I say that out loud about fantasy football tight ends. I don't think I've drafted like a 5th or 6th tight end off the board that has actually worked in 15 years.
I'm just glad the Cardinals have one of those guys. It's been far too long. Field Yates, must follow on Twitter, and of course Fantasy Focus. You got to check it out on a daily basis.
Bo, thank you.
Thanks, man.